Welcome back to a boat called Wanda. So in this update I show you all the work I've done to the bottom of the hull beneath the waterline, and basically I had to sand the entire surface area back with 80 grit paper to start to prepare for the osmosis treatment that I'll need to do to this hull. So I was actually quite pleased with the orbital sander that I was using, which was my cordless Ryobi 1 sander. And I wasn't sure whether the batteries were going to last long enough. Basically, I've got two 4 amp hour batteries and two 1.3 amp hour batteries. But in the end it was quite good, because the 4 amp hour batteries would last about 50 minutes or an hour, and the 1.3s would last about 20 minutes. So basically I was able to come in, put the first battery in, change it to the second 4 amp hour after 1 hour. That would give me 2 hours, and then I would go on to the 1.3 amp hour batteries as the 4 amp hour battery was charging. And then basically by the time the second of the 1.3 amp hour batteries was finished, I was back to the fully charged 4 amp hour. So basically it gave me a cycle of about 3.5 hours by rotating these batteries around with the charger. And that was actually enough for one session, because after a while it was quite difficult to work in that position crouched under the boat. So what I had to do first off was, using a scraper, basically take the last of the anti-fouling from the waterline. Now this was quite firmly stuck on here, and the grip blasting hadn't removed it all. So I used the scraper, as you can see here, and went round painstakingly scraping that off. You have to be quite careful that you don't dig into the fiberglass and gouge that away. Now after that was done, I used the sander to get the rest of that residue off, as you can see here. Again, I'm using an 80 grit. And that came off quite nicely with the sander, it wasn't too bad. So finally, once that anti-fouling along the waterline was removed, I could then move to sanding the rest of the hull. So let's have a look at how that looks now. Okay, so let's do a little comparison test here. So this is Wanda before I started sanding down the bottom with that 80 grit. And after about 10 hours, this is Wanda afterwards. Let's try that again. This is before, and this is after. Before, after, before, after. So it feels quite good to see that. But then again, it means I have to spend another 10 hours doing this side. Oh well. Enjoy the moment while it lasts, I guess. Well, I just thought I'd show you how I've been removing the through holes in Wanda. So here's an old through hole, and they can actually be very difficult to get out because of the adhesive compound that people generally seal them in there with. So, you know, after say 20 or 30 years of just being wedged into the hull with this sealant and a nut on the other side, they can be pretty hard to get out. So what I've been doing to remove these is I've just made up a little jig, which is basically a block of wood with 2 spaces either side, and then what I need is a nice solid strong bolt with a nut. So this is a M12 stainless steel, and it's about 130 mil long. It needs to be long enough to go through the hull and then through the through hull as well. So this is basically how it works. So here's the through hole in the side of the boat. So I put this jig on the outside of the hull with the bolt going into the through hole. So these spaces Let me just move this back a bit. There we go. These spacers will clamp against or cushion against the side of the hull like that. And then what I do is on the inside have a nice solid washer and a nut. And then ideally 2 people would make this easier, because you need to wind this end in whilst keeping this one stable or still. But what I've been doing, because most of these have been in cabinets, I've been putting like a large spanner on the nut and just having that rest against the side of the cabinet to stop it from moving. And then I get on the outside of the boat with my spanner, wind it in, and as you can see, it basically just draws the through hole towards this, and it pulls it out of its hole in the hull. So I've seen other people use these before. It's not my idea, but it's been really useful. So I'd recommend that you make up something like this if you are pulling out your through holes. Sometimes I apply a little bit of heat to the outside, a little bit of a gentle tap, and then so far this has worked every time. Another really useful tool to have to help when removing these through holes is this thing here, and this is called a step wrench, I believe. Now this was pretty hard to come by. I could only find 2 manufacturers, at least online, that create these, and I couldn't find any in Europe or the UK. So this actually came in from America. I think you can get something like this on Defender. But basically, as you can see here, what's happened is the through hole was spinning as I'm trying to remove this nut. So I'm using this to lock into the through hole, because there's these little lugs on the inside of this through hole that fit into these notches here. And it's really tight, really tight. Try a little bit more massage. Come on. Well, I continued like this for another 30 minutes before I got tired of it all. And after more bruised thumbs and swearing, I decided to come up with a new approach, and I found the words forming: when in doubt, get the grinder out. And I didn't have any more issues with that skin fitting. Okay, well I think I'll just give you another look at that tool I was using before, which is called a step wrench, because it's quite a handy thing to have if you're trying to remove skin fittings from your boat. So let's have a quick look at that. Okay, so here we have the step wrench, and you can see a little bit more clearly now. It's got these grooves along the side and different diameters for different sizes of skin fittings. Here's a typical skin fitting. Now, this is one that doesn't have the internal lugs on the outside, which is what I'm used to with my previous boat. This has actually got the internal lugs on the inside. I think you can see them there. 1, 2. And so that's basically what grips onto this groove there. You just slide it around until you get a fit. And that's how the whole thing works. Really, really useful. Quite difficult to source, but I would highly recommend getting one. And when it comes to installing a skin fitting, if this comes through from the outside of the hull, it's got this slug here so that you can hold onto it, put a screwdriver through there or something from inside to keep it secured. So quite a handy tool to have. But the really strange thing with Wanda is she's got a combination of both types of skin fittings, where some skin fittings have those internal lugs on the outside and some have the internal lugs on the inside, which makes it a real pain in the butt to work with. Let me show you an example of that now. So here's two skin fittings side by side. This is for the raw water intake for the engine, and this is the cockpit drain. So this one here, not sure if you can see, but it does have the internal lugs on the outside, so I can get the step wrench through this way to secure it. This one, however, doesn't have any internal lugs on the outside of the skin fitting. They're all right up there on the inside where the tail connects to it. So that makes it very difficult to work with, and I don't quite understand why they've got a mixture of both styles in this boat. When I come to replace these, I certainly won't be doing that. I'll have them all consistent, and all will have the internal lugs facing outwards, so I can always get to them externally using that step wrench. Well, what we're looking at here is the death of my Ryobi 1 orbital sander, unfortunately. I'm about 75% of the way through sanding down the hull, and it's packed up. So I thought it might have been the switch. I've had some issues with this switch here. Basically it gets dust inside it, and then the contact isn't good, and I thought that was a problem, so I pulled it apart. But as I did that, this sort of spring clip here broke off. This is the clip that makes contact with the battery. So yeah, it's broke. Unfortunately, it's dead. But not to worry, because sometimes the death of one power tool results in the birth of another power tool. And that's exactly what's happened here. I went down to the shop and I got this little Makita, which so far I'm really happy with. Initially I was a bit disappointed because it has this outlet here, which is way too narrow for my vacuum cleaner to hook up to. And I was really hoping to hook it up to the shop vac to reduce the dust. But as it turns out, this little bag's actually really good. And I'm finding that I get a lot less dust over myself when I'm sort of sanding upside down. So just that little bag, and the fact that there's a fan at the bottom of that engine which blows all of the material that way, has been really great. And the other good thing is it's only 1.2 kilograms, so it's a lot lighter than the Ryobi, which had the large battery, you know, hanging out of the back. So it's light, it's portable. I think it's about 400 watts. And just so far, I've just used it for a few minutes to test it out. It's great. So, you know, maybe it was about time the old Ryobi gave up the ghost. I doubt very much I can get a clip for this. If I can, I'll replace it and I'll keep it, because it's always nice to have a cordless one. But, you know, it wasn't so bad that it gave me an excuse to go and get a new power tool. That's always a happy occasion. Okay, well, I finished sanding down the hull beneath the waterline. So I've been over all of this with 80 grit paper and sanded the entire hull. Now obviously this side is quite messy with all the bits and pieces going on, with laminate there, and then some filler down the bottom, and then on the other side, which I've just finished the last couple of days, which is obviously much cleaner, much nicer, just a little bit of filler or epoxy down the bottom of the keel. The rest of it has come up pretty well. I've also been taking out the through holes where I can along the way to assist that. Not all of them are out yet. Some of them are just too hard to get to. I think I might actually need to move the engine or wait until I lift the engine before I can remove one of those back there. But anyway, so this is probably about 5 days work, I guess. Doing maybe 3 to 4 hours a day, and then that was enough. So that's a good piece of work complete. Okay, well I think I'll leave this update at this point. What I need to do next is do some research to work out what types of products or solutions I want to apply to the beneath the waterline of the hull to treat that for the osmosis. So I'll take some time to do some reading up on that. So next up I'll start removing the rest of the teak from the deck, and I'll also remove all the cap rail to start working on those 2 parts. So hopefully I can give you an update on that next time. So I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.